The goal is to direct wire about 50 feet of Ethernet cable from the room where my internet router is to where my office computer is. But the same principles apply to running 75 ohm cable for a cable TV, either from the basement or the attic access, or for running phone lines or speaker wiring. Anything you want to run, this is the way to do it. The reason I needed to hardwire the Ethernet cable is simple. It's because my computer, which was running on a Wi-Fi connector that I had, was very slow, and it suffered dropout about 50 times a day. An internet technician diagnosed that the Wi-Fi amplifier I was using on my Wi-Fi internet card would never be as good as a direct line. But, I said, it's 50 feet away. He said, well, just rewire it and permanently wire it. So the results, however, were unbelievable. When I ran the Ethernet along my floor to test it out to the room where the router is, my first speed test at speedtest.net read 4.5 megabits per second download speed. 4.5. I'm paying Time Warner Cable for 50 megabits per second, and I'm reading 4.5. No wonder it was slow. My download speed was 4.5. The upload speed was only 0.45. So when I hooked the Ethernet cable directly, look at the results shown on this speedtest.net speed check. I'm paying the cable company for 50 megs, as I said, download speed, but now with that cable directly connected, running across the floor, of course, I'm getting over 70 megabits per second now. So it's worth doing the permanent hardwiring job. The very first tool you should have is a stud finder. You can buy it at Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, wherever, and they're pretty cheap, battery operated. And you just run it along the wall, and it will beep, or there will be a green light that comes on that'll show you where a stud is. Well, you don't want to cut a hole in the wall where a stud is, so you want to be between them. So you'll find that you'll find a stud every 16 inches. So just between a stud where you want the outlet box to be, behind your computer or in your room where the router is for the internet, you just run this between it, and somewhere in the middle or anywhere but not at a stud is where you're going to cut the holes. So wiring anything is real simple to do. First thing that I did was I cut a 2x3 inch hole in the wall about 40 inches high off the floor in the office. Now this will take a blue plastic outlet box that'll fit in that hole, and they cost about $1 a piece at Lowe's. And the paint was kind of crappy touch-up job that I did earlier. See that, all that purple crap? Well, I fixed that next, you'll see. With the cutout from the next video shot, I brought it to Lowe's where they matched the paint perfectly. So all I did when I got a little quarter of touch-up paint was touch up that hole that you just saw all that purple around, and now it's beautiful. Now you'll need to cut a 2x3 inch hole. I do that instead of just beating a hole in the wall. You need to cut it out at the ceiling, about an inch below the ceiling, and you need to drill a 3/4 inch hole up through that upper wooden 2x4 plate to the attic in my case. If your access happens to be in the basement, which we don't have here in North Carolina, then this hole would just be at the floor just above a baseboard, and you would drill down through that plate. So to do that, you will need to buy or have an extension bit. See the one on the left? That is going to go in your drill. And then the paddle blade, 3/4 inch paddle blade, will fit into it, and you'll be able to drill up through, if there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 sill plates in the basement, or upper plates for the attic access, it's going to go right up through there. You don't want to just have a drill bit because you'll never make it through even two 2x4 sill plates. Now, let's move on. Now, in my case with the attic, you're never going to find out where you drill that hole unless you poke something up from like the router room or my office, something very long, a foot or two long, up through the hole. That way you can see it anywhere that it pops up in the attic, because your attic is going to be like this one, totally insulated, a bunch of studs, all kinds of crap in there, and you'll never find it. So you could either leave the extension and drill in the hole that you just poked through if it's long enough, or just find something that's, you know, a 1/4 inch round, or buy a piece of wood that's 1/4 inch round at any Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. Paint the top red if you want to, and stick that up through the hole. Same with the basement. You want to run it down through the hole so you can easily find it. This is what the wall in my office looked like when both holes, the attic access here, are drilled. Now I used a utility knife to cut the holes out. I drew them out 2x3, or you can buy the box, the plastic blue box, and just run a pencil across the top of the box, both sides and the bottom, and that'll give you the size that you need to cut out. Now I used a utility knife rather than a jigsaw to reduce the gypsum dust, which will be all over the room and the floors and the walls and everything else. So it's real simple. If you have a sharp utility knife, just run it into the wall, cut. Make sure you don't cut into any wires, so make sure you don't have any outlets below you. That's a sure sign that there's a wire probably going up through that, between the two studs. Now, once I ran the wires from the attic, in my case, down to that top hole, it was easy. I just pulled in enough wire from the attic through that hole to go all the way down to the bottom hole. Then when I got that length properly in my hand, I put it back up through that top hole and just simply dropped it, and you could see it at the bottom. So there's no snaking wires or anything if you're going to have attic access. So it was real easy to do, and I used the cutout from the router room, the white one, to stick in the top hole in the office. Then I just taped it with joint compound mesh tape, and then you would compound it with joint compound, sand it down, and you'd be all set to paint it. So like it never happened. Now the final result of all that cutting and painting and trimming and all that is that I inserted the new Ethernet wall plate from right there on the wall behind my computer, which is to the right, and it's just a 2-foot Ethernet cable that I plug into the wall and plug into the back of my computer. All hardwired, direct, painted, done just like professionals would do it. And this is the bottom hole, about 40 inches or so above the floor in the router room. Notice the white walls. I added the blue outlet box, as you can see, and the Ethernet wire is coming through the top hole in the outlet box. This is the top hole in the router room, and you can see the Ethernet wire to the left where I simply dropped it down from the attic through the hole that I drilled, and it just went right into this area here. I pulled it out of that hole, measured the length to the bottom hole again, like I did in the office, put it back in the hole, dropped the wire down, and just pulled the wire through the bottom hole. Not a problem. Now, if you're going from the basement, you may need either a wire snake, it's called, which you can buy anywhere, Home Depot, Lowe's, or simply use a coat hanger if you only have to go down a foot or so into the basement. Drop the coat hanger into the hole that you drilled into the basement sill plate, and just fish the wire up to the bottom hole, and then you're going to need a longer coat hanger or 2 coat hangers or a wire snake, which I used because it's 25 footer and I'm always doing something, and you can run the snake down into the bottom hole and then just snake it up to the hole that's 40 inches above the floor. Now, in the event that your wall happens to be an outer wall, it's probably been insulated something like this. Well, in that case, if I cut a hole in the wall, the wall board that would be tied to these studs, the wire wouldn't just conveniently drop down in. In that case, if you're going to be working with an outside wall, which is going to be insulated, you will have to buy a 25-foot snake. They don't cost that much money, but then you would just run the snake down through the top hole, or up from the bottom hole to the top hole, or down from the 40-inch hole in the wall down if you're doing a basement cut. Either way, you're going to need a snake because the wire will never fall through insulation. Just letting you know. Look, see what I told you? This one's at Home Depot, a wire snake, 25-footer, $11.87. It's probably just as cheap to buy one if you're going to be routing wires, more than once, I suppose. This is the view of both holes drilled in the router room. So you can see the one that's going to be right behind the router when I put it on the desk, and then the access hole up at the top. In your case, if it's a basement, that top hole would be down about an inch off the baseboard. If you don't have a baseboard, then an inch off the floor. Remember now, I had to run 50 feet of wire from the office through the attic, and it's actually a 50-foot Ethernet cable that worked just fine. I had a few feet left over actually, but if you need up to 100-foot cable, Lowe's sells those too, and there is no noticeable drop in quality. This is the tricky part. I bought this setup at Lowe's. It comes in 2 pieces. You have to be careful. The plate is nothing but a wall plate with a square hole in it. I think it costs about $3 or $4. The Ethernet jack that's in the middle there is separate. That cost about $9. So you're looking at maybe $13 for a complete setup, which is still pretty cheap. Now you just push the insert, the middle insert, into the wall plate and it locks in place. This is the back side of that setup when I pushed that insert into the wall plate, where you can see that the Ethernet plugs directly into the back of this plate. Now, don't buy the plate where it looks like a complete setup, because if you look at the back of that, you will see that the Ethernet connection in the back has about 6 or 7 screws where you would have to actually cut the Ethernet wire and wire each color code to a screw. Well, screw that. You want the easiest, simplest way. This is the way to do it. Plug and go. And this is the front view of that assembled Ethernet setup that I'm going to just plug my wire into the back and then plug a wire from the front into my computer or the router. And here it is, all installed in the router room wall, 40 inches or so above the floor. Now, I'm assuming that you want your router on a short stand rather than down on the floor, so 45 inches seemed right to me. The computer photo is coming up, or I should say the router photo is coming up next. Now, there it is, all complete with a little 2-foot cable running over to the router on a stand. Now, when I get done patching the top hole in the wall, well, I got to put my ladder there now. When I slide that stand over, and you'll probably have a stand too, then that wall plate basically disappears anyway. So that's the way you want to set it up. Of course, the final thing that you're going to have to do is do a paint match. Here I have the wall cutout from both the office, the pink one there, and the router room, the white one there. And the cover from previous paint that I bought is there as well. Well, I brought both. I didn't need the cover. I brought both outlet pieces to Lowe's, and they perfectly matched the 2x3 cutout sections. This is why I cut out a larger piece than just trying to peel off a little piece of wall, the outer paper. They need a bigger slice of your wall, and you're going to patch it anyway, so it's no big deal. But they need a bigger slice to match the paint perfectly. Now, both of these paints are about a year old, so they still matched it. I mean, your walls are going to fade over time, but if you cut out a piece like this and bring it to Lowe's or Home Depot, they're both just as good, or Benjamin Moore or whatever, they will perfectly match your paint. So here's the finished upper hole in the office where the computer is, all done, nice, sanded, joint compounded, and painted. Likewise, this is the router room upper hole, so good luck routing the wires. It's easy to do. This whole project took me, I'd say, 2 hours. Then the following day, I sanded the first coat of joint compound, then added the top coat of joint compound later the same day, and sanded that down real light. And what you want to do there is take a piece of tape, like painter's tape or whatever, some kind of a tape that's not going to pull the wallpaper off your walls, but just tape a cardboard maybe longer than the hole, that's all. Tape it to the wall just below that cutout, and then fold the cardboard up at a 45-degree angle so that when you're sanding it, the joint compound sanding will fall into the cardboard, and it's a whole lot easier just to vacuum that cardboard up with a small shop vac than it is to get the dust all over your carpet or wood floors or whatever. So that's how I did it. There it is, 2 coats of paint, all touched up, done.